Okay, so I now have my thread coming out the middle and coming out in between. Now what's awesome, I'm going to explain this a second. What is good about having it come down lower is since this side is still open, when I pull my ends and my knots through, I'm going to pull that straight out. And since this side is open, I can easily retrieve my needle. And another thing that's nice about putting your knot a little lower here is because knots are joints, basically, essentially, I should say. So if I have a joint here, this side will still be straight. So this side will help reinforce that knot. So on this one, I'm going to have to put my knot a little bit higher because then it's going to be easier for me to retrieve my needle up here because this is my open zone. And again, if my knot's here, this side is still straight. So that's going to help reinforce this side. So I thought I'd make that clear on why I decided to do that and why I do that in actually all my leather work. Keeps all my knots hidden, but also reinforces. You don't have to work harder to work smarter. So here I came to my middle, or a little bit past it, either one, doesn't really matter. Now I'm going to turn around and go back through. So basically that loop, I just whoop, turn around, go back in reverse. And that's still going to give me my saddle stitch look without actually really being a saddle stitch. And now when I do my opposite side, all I have to do is come up to here and go back in reverse and do the same thing, and it will look exactly like this, and no one will know that it was just two sides, you know, done there. So you won't see any knots, you won't see any of that good stuff. Everything will all be hidden and strengthened, reinforced, while still allowing me to work with shorter threads. Now, my mom taught me a really cool story, and I love sharing it, about a king who had this daughter. She was a princess, obviously. Wow, this is what I get for waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning and then just starting the video and starting working. I'm not even awake. But this princess, she fell in love with a poor man. And the king did not like that at all. He wanted her to marry somebody else, and like a knight or something. So they decided to come up with a deal that whoever could make the king a nice coat first would get to marry the princess. Now, since the princess knew how to sew, as all women usually in that time were taught how to do, she gave everyone else needles because she had to thread everybody's needles, but they had to do the work to make the coat. So she gave the knights and the princes and everyone else needles with long threads, while she gave her poor man, the one she loved, a needle with a shorter thread. Everyone else with long threads had their threads get tangled, and they had to stop. They had to fix the problem and try and re-sew again, and their knots would twist and tangle, and they'd have to stop and fix it. Well, because the princess had given the short threads to the one that she loved, he could work faster without having the problem of having knots. Well, the king finally got his coat. The poor man produced the better coat because there weren't knots in the threads while he was working. So the princess got to marry the poor man that she loved, and essentially by choice, because she knew that the longer the thread, the more chances are of having knots. And here my thread's starting to knot, but it took this long to do it. So I hope that story helps make sense to you, and why I didn't just start up here and use a really long thread to try and do both sides, because that is just a mess and I'd rather not have to deal with that. So using 2 sides, short thread, but because I'm working again as like a saddle stitch, I basically almost get to use 4 because I'm bending 1 in half. So that's the beauty of learning some of these sewing skills, some of these sewing traits. I hope that helps you. And you're trying to decide and plan out how you want to hand sew your next projects. So you do want to make sure your knots are protected and covered, but you also want to make sure that it's not going to come out or anything, and be a pill to work with like this is starting to try and be now. I just have a short way to go, and I can tell this thread is starting to feel a little bit worn. Gonna open that up. Open this up too. Let's see, yep, okay. Got that all open. That needle can just pull right through a little easier. Okay, so through here, down and through the middle. Go ahead and take my needle off. Set it over here where I won't drop it on the floor again. My tail's long. Tie a knot right down inside there. Pull it nice and tight, so that knot just kind of slides in between. Just go ahead and pull that. Now I'm going to cut this just a little bit longer. So it's going to leave that so that way that end won't try and come up and out. Alright, now I get to do the other side. I'll be doing it the same way, only when I make my saddle stitch coming back up here, I'm going to have my thread come out right about there so I can cut my thread a little bit long when I finish off my needles coming up here. And I'll be back when I have all that good stuff done.